Picture this: the faint hum of a lawnmower slicing through the stillness of a suburban morning, a sound so familiar it's almost invisible, like the ticking of a clock you've stopped noticing. That's where I live. In the kind of place where every day feels like it's been photocopied from the one before. My name's Juliet, and at 37, I've settled into a life that's as comfortable as an old sweater, worn, a little frayed at the edges, but still warm enough to get by. I'm married to Harvey, a man who's as steady as the sunrise. He's in his early 40s, a driver for a big logistics company, always on the road, hauling goods from one nowhere to another. He's quiet, not in a brooding way, but more like he's saving his words for something worth saying. We've got a small home on a street lined with identical houses, each with a patch of grass out front and a mailbox that's seen better days. Inside, our life hums along on autopilot. Breakfast at 7, dishes by 8, the TV flickering with the same reruns every night. It's not a bad life, just one that's lost its shine, like a coin you've rubbed too many times. A few months back, I made a change though. I needed something to break the monotony, to fill the hours Harvey's away. So, I took a job as a caregiver for his boss, Mr. Bennett. He's 63, a man whose body has started to betray him, especially his bad knee that turns every step into a battle. Harvey got me the gig, said it'd be good for us, a little extra cash, a way to stay connected to his world. Mr. Bennett lives on the edge of town in a house that looks like it's been standing since the earth was young. It's sprawling, all creaky wooden floors that groan underfoot and heavy drapes that hang like they're guarding secrets, carrying the musty scent of decades. The windows are tall, but they don't let in much light, as if the house itself is too tired to wake up. Walking through the front door feels like stepping into a different era, one where time moves slower, heavier. My role there is simple, but all-consuming. I'm Mr. Bennett's hands when his tremble too much to hold a cup, his voice when he needs to call out for something from across the room, his tea maker when the kettle's too heavy to lift. I'm the one who fetches his pills from the bathroom cabinet, counting them out with a precision I never knew I had. I help him down the stairs, one slow step at a time, his grip on my arm tight but grateful. I fluff the cushions on his ancient armchair, making sure he's comfortable, and I listen to the same stories he tells every day about a life he lived long before I was born. It's mundane work, the kind that fills your hours without filling your soul. But there's a strange comfort in the routine, a predictability that anchors me. Every morning starts the same way. Harvey and I climb into his old pickup truck, the engine grumbling to life like it's as reluctant to start the day as I sometimes am. We drive in silence, the kind that's grown between us over the years, not tense, just empty. The sky is usually gray, heavy with clouds that seem to press down on the world, and the windshield wipers flick back and forth with a hypnotic rhythm, clearing away the drizzle that clings to the glass. I stare out the window, watching the blur of trees and faded billboards, until we turn onto the long, gravel driveway leading to Mr. Bennett's house. The tires crunch over the stones, a sound that's become as familiar as my own heartbeat, and I feel the day officially begin. Harvey pulls to a stop near the front porch, the truck idling as he reaches for his thermos of coffee. He doesn't come in, never has. He just gives me a small nod, a silent, "See you later," and I grab my bag of supplies from the back seat. It's stuffed with everything I might need: medication schedules, extra bandages, a notebook for jotting down anything unusual. I sling it over my shoulder, step out into the damp air, and make my way to the front door while Harvey settles in to wait. The house looms ahead, its weathered siding and sagging porch looking even more tired in the muted light of morning. I push the door open, the hinges creaking like they're protesting my arrival, and step into the dim foyer, the smell of old wood and faint lavender hitting me as it always does. Inside, Mr. Bennet is already in his spot, perched in that ancient armchair by the window. He's a fixture there, as much a part of the house as the warped floorboards or the dusty chandelier overhead. His face is a map of lines, each one etched deep from years I can't even imagine, but his eyes, they're something else. Sharp, piercing, like they're cutting right through the fog of age to see everything. Sometimes I catch him watching me before I've even said a word, and it makes my skin prickle, though I can't quite say why. I set my bag down and start the morning ritual. I pour his pills into a tiny porcelain cup, the kind that looks like it belongs in a dollhouse, and hand it to him with a glass of water. His fingers brush mine as he takes it, just for a split second, and I tell myself it's nothing, just an accident of shaky hands. But I notice it every time. We don't talk much at first. I help him stand, steadying his arm as we shuffle down the stairs to the kitchen, his bad knee making each step a slow, deliberate effort. His grip on me is firm, almost too tight, like he's afraid of falling, or maybe afraid of letting go. Once we're downstairs, I get him settled. I remember that day so clearly, the way the rain came down in sheets, turning the world outside into a blurry watercolor painting. The air was thick with moisture, heavy and clinging, as if it was pressing against me even before I stepped out of Harvey's truck. I could hear the droplets tapping on the roof of the cab, a relentless rhythm that matched the uneasy thudding in my chest. Harvey pulled up to Mr. Bennet's house as he always did, the gravel crunching under the tires. But there was something off in the way he looked at me. His face was unreadable, a mask of quiet I couldn't decipher, and as I opened the door to get out, he muttered something about being back in an hour. His voice was low, almost lost under the sound of the rain, and I didn't think much of it then, just nodded and grabbed my bag, stepping into the downpour. The house felt different as I pushed open the creaky front door, the usual musty scent of old wood mixing with the dampness that seemed to seep through the walls. It was quieter somehow, more intimate, as if the rain had wrapped us in a cocoon, shutting out the rest of the world. I shook off the water from my coat, hung it on the rack by the door, and made my way to the living room where Mr. Bennet always sat. The tall windows were streaked with rain, distorting the view of the driveway outside and the faint light filtering through cast long, wavering shadows across the floor. He was there, as expected, in his leather armchair, but there was a stillness to him today, a weight in his silence that hadn't been there before. I went through the motions of my tasks, checking his medication, pouring water into a glass, adjusting the blanket over his lap. But every movement felt slower, heavier, like I was wading through something thicker than air. His demeanor had changed. I could feel it in the way he watched me, his sharp eyes lingering longer than usual. When he spoke, his words came out deliberate, each one chosen with care, cutting through the quiet like the rain on the windows. I was counting out his pills, the tiny white tablets clicking against the porcelain cup, when he suddenly asked me to stay longer today. His voice was low, almost a whisper, carrying a tone I hadn't heard before, something close to pleading. "You're rare, Juliet," he said, and as I handed him the cup, his hand brushed mine. It wasn't the accidental graze I'd felt so many times before. This was intentional, lingering, and it sent a jolt through me, sharp and electric. My breath caught, and I froze for a moment, my mind racing with a storm of conflicting thoughts. I knew I should pull away, step back, keep the boundary firm between us. But there was something in that touch, in the way he looked at me, that stirred a hunger I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. A need for attention, for validation, for something to fill the empty spaces Harvey and I had let grow between us. I stood there, rooted, as the rain kept drumming outside, the sound a constant reminder of the world just beyond those walls. My heart was pounding, a wild thing in my chest, and I felt the pull, the dangerous allure of being seen in a way I hadn't been in years. I didn't move away. I couldn't. And then, the tension that had been building for weeks, maybe months, snapped like a taut wire. It happened in that very room, right by the window overlooking the driveway where Harvey's truck sat idling, where he waited, oblivious to the betrayal unfolding just feet away. Mr. Bennett's actions were slow, deliberate, his touch careful, almost reverent, as if I were a treasure he'd hesitated to claim for too long. His hand moved to my arm, then my shoulder, and I felt the warmth of it through my thin sweater. A stark contrast to the cold glass of the window pressing against my other side as I leaned there, caught between escape and surrender. I didn't stop it. I couldn't. Or maybe I wouldn't. There was a part of me, raw and aching, that needed. As I stepped out of Mr. Bennett's house into the relentless rain, the world felt like it had shifted under my feet, like I was walking on a tightrope I hadn't even known I'd climbed. My skin still tingled, a lingering echo of his touch, a sensation I couldn't shake off no matter how hard I tried to focus on the cold, wet air hitting my face. My breath came in uneven bursts, shallow and quick, as if my lungs couldn't quite keep up with the storm raging inside me. I tugged my coat tighter around myself, the fabric already damp from the short walk to the door, and forced my expression into something neutral, something that wouldn't betray the chaos churning in my chest. I couldn't let anyone see. Not yet. Not now. Maybe not ever. The gravel driveway stretched out before me, each step I took feeling heavier than the last, like my boots were filled with lead. The stones crunched underfoot, a harsh grating sound that cut through the steady patter of rain, grounding me in a way I desperately needed. My hair was soaked through almost instantly, strands sticking to my forehead and neck, the cold water trickling down my skin like a reminder of reality, of consequences. I kept my eyes on the ground, watching the way the rain turned the gravel into a slick, muddy mess, trying to anchor myself in the mundane, in anything that wasn't the memory of what had just happened behind those creaky walls. But it was no use. Every thought circled back to that room, to the warmth of his hand, to the way I'd let myself be pulled into something I knew I shouldn't have. Through the misty haze of the downpour, I could see Harvey's truck parked where it always was, a dark shape against the gray backdrop of the storm. His silhouette was visible through the windshield, blurred by the streaks of water on the glass, but I knew he was watching, waiting as he always did. My stomach twisted at the sight of him, a knot of guilt tightening so fiercely I almost stumbled. As I got closer, the passenger door swung open with a faint creak, Harvey's hand pushing it from the inside. He didn't say a word, didn't even look at me directly, just kept his gaze forward, his face a mask of quiet routine. I hesitated for a split second, my hand gripping the edge of the door, before sliding into the seat and pulling it shut behind me with a dull thud. The sound felt final, like a gavel coming down, sealing something I couldn't undo. Inside the truck, the air was suffocating, thick with the smell of damp fabric and the lingering trace of Harvey's coffee from earlier. The windows were fogged up, condensation clinging to the glass like a veil, shutting us off from the world outside. The faint static of the radio buzzed in the background, a low hum that did nothing to fill the oppressive silence between us. I glanced at Harvey out of the corner of my eye, taking in the way his hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale from the pressure, tighter than they needed to be. It was a small thing, but it screamed tension, a silent signal that something was off, even if he hadn't said a word. My heart thudded harder, each beat a hammer against my ribs, as I wondered what he saw, what he sensed. Did he know? Could he tell just by looking at me, by the way I couldn't quite meet his eyes? He started the engine, the truck rumbling to life with a familiar growl, and we pulled away from the house, the gravel crunching one last time under the tires before giving way to the smoother hum of the road. The silence stretched on, heavy and unbroken, for what felt like hours, though I knew it was only minutes. The rain kept falling, drumming against the roof in a relentless rhythm, the windshield wipers swiping back and forth with a mechanical persistence that mirrored the loop of thoughts in my head. I wrestled with myself in that silence, torn between guilt so sharp it cut, a lingering desire I couldn't quite extinguish, and, most confusing of all, a strange lack of regret. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't deny the weight of it all pressing down on me as we drove. The road ahead was a desolate stretch, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the gray, rain-soaked landscape, with nothing but the occasional flicker of a distant car's taillights to break the monotony. Inside the truck, the silence between Harvey and me was a living thing, thick and suffocating, wrapping around us like the fog on the windows. I kept my eyes fixed on those blurred red lights ahead, watching them shimmer through the downpour, trying to steady my breathing, to keep the storm inside me from spilling out. The rain hammered the roof, a constant, unyielding beat, like a clock ticking down to something inevitable. I could feel Harvey next to me, his presence heavy even without a word, and I didn't dare turn to look at him, didn't dare see what might be in his eyes. Then, out of nowhere, the silence shattered. His voice sliced through the quiet, low and deliberate, each word measured like he'd been holding them back for too long. I saw the curtains close. He never closes them, except when you're there. My stomach dropped, a sickening lurch, like the ground had vanished beneath me. Heat rushed to my cheeks, burning despite the chill in the cab, and I felt my hands clench involuntarily in my lap. I couldn't look at him, couldn't face whatever was behind those words. Instead, I stared harder at those taillights, willing them to pull me away from this moment, to give me an escape I didn't deserve. But there was no running from it. His tone wasn't sharp, wasn't laced with the kind of anger I might have expected. It was heavier, quieter, carrying a kind of knowing resignation that cut deeper than any shout ever could. It was the sound of someone who'd already accepted a truth they didn't want to face, and that hurt more than I could have imagined. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt tight, like the words I might have said were lodged there, choking me. The weight of what he'd just said settled over me, a cold, heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. He'd been watching, not just today, but maybe for days, weeks even. Piecing things together in that quiet way of his, the way he always did, noticing the little details I'd thought were invisible. The closed curtains, such a small thing, something I hadn't even considered might stand out. But to Harvey, it was a signal, a crack in the routine he knew so well. How long had he been sitting out there in the truck, staring at that house, seeing more than I ever thought he could? How much had he figured out on his own, without me saying a word? I stole a glance at him then, just a flicker of my eyes, and saw the way his jaw was set, tight and unyielding, a muscle twitching faintly under the skin. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping him steady. He didn't look at me, didn't turn his head even an inch, just kept his gaze locked on the road ahead, as if looking at me might confirm something he wasn't ready to face. My mind raced, a whirlwind of questions I didn't have answers for. Did he know everything? Had he seen more than just the curtains, caught a glimpse of something through a gap in the fabric, a shadow of movement that gave me away? Or was this just a suspicion, a gut feeling he was testing with those carefully chosen words? I couldn't tell, and the uncertainty gnawed at me, tearing at the edges of my already frayed nerves. The rain kept falling, the wipers kept swiping, and the silence crept back in, heavier now, charged with everything left unsaid. I felt like I was drowning in it, in the unspoken accusations hanging between us, in the weight of my own choices. My heart was still pounding, a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and I couldn't stop the thoughts from spiraling. What if he'd seen it all? What if he'd been out there waiting while I was inside, losing myself in a moment? As the truck rumbled along the wet asphalt, the rain began to ease. No longer a fierce assault, but a gentle drizzle, tapping softly on the roof like a hesitant whisper. The world outside the window smeared into a dull gray, the shapes of trees and houses blending into a watercolor blur, as if reality itself was dissolving under the weight of what hung between Harvey and me. I kept my eyes on that hazy view, unable to face him, unable to break the silence that had become our new language. It wasn't just quiet, it was a wall, built brick by brick with every unspoken word, every sidelong glance I didn't dare make. Harvey didn't speak again, and I didn't either. There was nothing left to say. Not yet. Not when the air felt so brittle it might shatter with the wrong breath. The drive seemed to stretch on forever, each mile a slow unraveling of the life I'd known. I could still feel the ghost of Mr. Bennett's touch on my skin, a warmth that lingered despite the damp chill seeping into my bones from my soaked coat. It was a sensation I couldn't shake, a reminder of a choice I'd made, one that had carved a chasm between me and the man sitting just inches away. I wondered if Harvey could sense it too, if he could feel the shift in me, the way I'd come back to him different, marked by something he couldn't name but knew was there. His hands stayed tight on the wheel, his posture rigid, and I knew he was holding himself together the same way I was, barely. When we finally pulled into the driveway of our small house, the familiar sight of its chipped paint and sagging porch felt like a stranger's home. The drizzle had left a sheen on everything, making the world glisten in a way that felt almost mocking, too pretty for the mess inside me. Harvey cut the engine, and for a moment, we just sat there, the silence louder than ever in the absence of the truck's growl. Then, without a word, he got out, the door slamming shut with a dull finality that made me flinch. I followed, my boots scuffing against the wet pavement, my bag heavy on my shoulder as I trudged behind him to the front door. Inside, we moved through the motions of evening like ghosts in a play we'd rehearsed too many times. I unlocked the door, the key sticking in the old lock as it always did, and pushed it open with a creak that echoed in the quiet. Harvey hung his wet coat on the rack by the door, the fabric dripping softly onto the floor, a tiny puddle forming beneath it. I did the same, peeling off my own coat with slow, deliberate movements, as if each action could delay whatever was coming next. The house smelled of stale air and the faint trace of last night's dinner, a reminder of the mundane life we'd built, now fractured in ways I couldn't yet measure. We didn't look at each other, didn't touch, didn't speak. I headed to the kitchen, pulling leftovers from the fridge, some casserole I barely remembered making, and set them to heat in the microwave. The hum of the appliance the only sound in the room. Harvey sat at the small dining table, staring at nothing, his hands folded in front of him like he was waiting for a verdict. I watched the numbers tick down on the microwave, my mind drifting back to that moment in Mr. Bennett's house, to the way it had felt to be seen, truly seen, after so long in the shadows of routine. But as I stood there, the weight of Harvey's silence pressed down harder, and I realized this fracture between us wasn't just about what had happened today. It was about the emptiness that had been there all along. A hollow space we'd both ignored, pretending it wasn't growing wider with every passing year. We'd built a life on autopilot, on the comfort of habit. But habits can't hold a marriage together when the foundation's already cracked. What happened with Mr. Bennett? It wasn't the cause. It was the catalyst. The thing that finally broke open what we'd been too afraid to face. I don't know what Harvey will do next. But as I watch him pack his bags, I realize that sometimes letting go is the only way to truly move forward. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.